right, guys, we gotta talk about Paper Mario. It's very, very important. As somebody who grew up loving the first Paper Mario and eventually grew to have a fondness for the second Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door, that just got a remake, remaster. It's hard to say what it is. I guess remaster is probably the closest thing for the Nintendo Switch. And don't mind me playing WoW in the background, but we do need to talk about some recent controversy that happened to it, or I guess non-traversy is probably the best word for it. We'll throw up fan art first, and then we'll get into everything here. This one here is from Riddle of Lightning, and it says, My Taxes folder, for my eyes only! So, if you know what incident this is referring to, then, you know, then you know. And if you don't, then your eyes are blessed. So you're perfectly fine. Oh, WoW Essential is what you're talking about. That's fair, Steffi. Thank you very much, Riddle of Lightning, for that. Oh boy. Anyways, as always, if you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about what has happened here recently. So, Paper Mario is getting a remake for the Switch. It's out now, and I've heard it is fantastic, but there is one thing that a lot of people have had some questions about, and that is the translation of the game. You see, back in the day, we basically understood that the Japanese version and the English version of the game were very, very different. The localizers took a lot of liberties with the original script for Thousand Year Door. It was a pretty common thing to do back then, to be fair. Now, localizers don't do as much as they used to, but it used to be the case that this was a... You were almost always getting fed a super truncated version of a story. If there were instances of... Let's say, for example, in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, there's a big speech that Yusei has about atheism and humanity's not needing gods anymore to rely on, as he's in the middle of his battle with Rex Godwin. And in the English version, they localized the character to Rex Goodwin, and instead it's a speech about the power of friendship. That's a thing that you basically got all the time with localizers between the 80s all the way up to the early aughts. And it's a bit of a problem. So the controversy here centers around one Paper Mario character specifically, and that is Vivian. Now, if you are not familiar with Vivian, let's go ahead and throw up... Well, not Vivian herself, but Grum's bitching about Vivian. Now, we'll get to Grum's in a second, but Vivian is this little purple character right here. We'll open image in new tab and zoom in on her. She's very, very cute. She is one of the best characters in all of Thousand Year Door, and I adore her story arc a lot. In the English version of the story, what we got for Vivian was a story of a girl who was basically Cinderella. Let's go ahead and say that way. Without the adoption story, but definitely with a lot of the... You are in a family that does not like you, and you are forced to do all kinds of things for this family, and they just do not respect you or like you in any way, shape, or form. That's basically what her story was in the English version of Thousand Year Door. So as you went through Thousand Year Door in the English version of the game, if you encountered Vivian, she was always bullied by her sisters, and they never made any allusions that she was anything other than their sister. But if you played the Japanese version of the game, the story was a bit different. Every single character referred to Vivian with male pronouns, except for Vivian, and there's where the controversy lies. So, obviously, when we're talking about something from another language, it can be hard for people to get the entire nuance of it, and especially when there are a ton of YouTubers talking about this, it makes it hard to figure out what these things are specifically if you're just browsing effectively Did You Know Gaming videos on the topic. But it was basically the most commonly understood thing in the community that enjoys games like Paper Mario, the Mario RPG community, I guess we'll call it, insofar as you can use the word community to describe anything on the internet, with all the infighting and Ouroboros tail-eating we do. But it was understood that Vivian was trans. This was the most well-documented piece of Paper Mario lore ever. Every single time you heard, "Did you know?" and it was about Paper Mario, you knew Vivian was gonna come up. Also, Sakura says how Japanese interacts with gendered language is very different from English. Right. Very, very true. Said it was known ages ago in the original version she was referred to as a trans woman. So the thing is, though, in the Japanese version of the game, they never used the word trans. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that gender is treated differently in Japan than it is treated here in America. So explicitly saying, "Hello, this is Vivian. She is a trans character. She is the transiest of trans characters. She is trans girl cock." That's not gonna happen in the Japanese version of the game. That's just not gonna fucking happen. There's no reason for them to do that. Old Gus says there's a really special translation mishap, considering the default of using pronouns in Japan is skip it. Everyone knows what you're talking about. If they said it, it was for a reason. Correct. And in the original Paper Mario, again, Vivian's sisters specifically referred to her as, and I've actually got a post here. Do I still have the post here? I thought I did. Huh. Hold on. I pulled up a bunch of information for this, and then it looks like part of it just kind of got eaten. One sec. Here we go. So here is the dialogue and how people were, how she was referred to in Paper Mario a lot. There was a bit here where it said that she, in the Japanese version, and I can't find it on here because I don't remember exactly. Here we are. In the Japanese Nintendo GameCube version of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, Vivian is implied to either be a transgender woman or a male-identified crossdresser, while various other characters and narrative text describe Vivian using masculine terms, such as otako or ototo, man or little brother. Vivian initially describes the Shadow Sirens as San Shime, 3 sisters, and routinely uses the feminine first-person pronoun atai, though this pronoun is also used by some effeminate male characters in Japanese media. Furthermore, she becomes upset when Beldam insults her by referring to her with masculine terms. In both her party profile for Thousand Year Door and her catch card in Super Paper Mario, she is referred to using the term otakonoko, being written in katakana, which can be interpreted as either boy or literally male daughter, a Japanese language term that refers to a feminine presenting or cross-dressing man. However, like I said, once you got to the English version of the game, they changed that to her just being bullied. Now, what people like Grums have tried to do, and this is where we go back to Grums's post specifically here, what people like Grums try to do is say that the localizers were woke and they made Vivian trans. Despite the fact that Vivian refers to herself as her and everybody referred to her as a guy in the game, which would mean that her family was deliberately misgendering her, and that was a point of distrust for her family. Literally, in the original Japanese translation of the game, that was what was done. But because the English version of the game only had her being bullied, that, of course, seems to be enough for people like Grums, who, let me be frank, and I'm playing World of Warcraft Classic specifically because I'm currently on a WoW kick, but also because Grums claims to have been one of the developers on WoW Classic. So this is also me playing to say, fuck you, Grums. I enjoy games that you say you've been involved in, but you yourself, you are the Hatsune Miku of the development team. Just going to go ahead and say that right now. But Grums wants to sit here and say that Vivian was a cross-dresser, a femboy, not trans, but Vivian never described herself as anything but a girl. in the original translation. So what's the bit that has everybody up in arms? Well, this is the new translation that they've gone with, and the Japanese version of the game affects this as well. So this is not just they kept the original script for the Japanese version, and then for the American version they changed the script to this in order to be closer aligned with the wokeisms in the West. This is what they went with in Japan as well. We got not just a translation difference, but an original script change as well. This is her line in the new version. Truth is, it took me a while to realize I was their sister, not their brother. Now their usual bullying feels heavier. So what this implies is that every single time that her sisters refer to her as a guy, it is a deliberate and calculated attempt to be cruel, which is in line with the story of Thousand Year Door. In Thousand Year Door, Vivian joins your party because of her sister's cruelty and how nice Mario was to her throughout the campaign, as opposed to what she had been dealing with the entire time. This is not a modification on the original story. This is a clarification on the original story. And that is very, very different. But grifters like Grums desperately need you to believe that they alone are the arbiters of truth here. Because they alone need you to spend money for their account on Twitter so they can do things like prove that Space Marines can't be women. That is what this man's livelihood has become. And it's not just his livelihood. Other people who were considered gaming giants or gaming greats back in the day have fallen into the same rut. People like Stuttering Craig of Screw Attack have also fallen into this rut of being basically worthless man-children who do nothing but complain about video games going woke, which is effectively just old man yelling at cloud in perpetuity. That's all it is. Now, if we look at the people who are supporting the shit that Grums is talking about, before we get to that, actually, there's another thing he says here. We have such a problem with kids being forced into gender assignment before they are consenting adults that this doesn't belong in a kid's game by Nintendo of America. So here's the thing, Grums, you do understand that we don't have a problem with kids being forced into gender assignment in America the way you're describing. We do have a problem with intersex children having forced surgery done on them where the parents and the doctor get to choose the gender that that child should be. I have a friend who went through this, actually, and guess what? The gender that they ended up being did not match the gender of the genitalia that the doctor decided to destroy. Or their gender matched the genitalia the doctor decided to destroy. So, you know what that means to me? That means there is absolutely no reason to believe the shit Grums is saying, because it doesn't mean what he thinks it means. It doesn't mean what he says it means. We have an entire industry built on keeping gender norms as they are, but Grums tries to pretend that that industry has been uprooted at some point, somehow. Then you have people in support of Grums, like this one right here, saying, you already have people claiming it's more faithful to the original script when it isn't. It's similar to what happened to Bridget in Guilty Gear. The culture worms its way into these companies, be it localization or development, and they pander to cultural vultures and predators. So, let's talk about Bridget, then. You know, Bridget, the character who started out in Guilty Gear as a femboy and then eventually, through her last campaign in the latest game, came out as a trans woman and said, actually, I think I do feel more comfortable as a woman. You know, that thing that sounds exactly like what any trans girl will go on in their gender journey? So there are some trans women who realize that they are women early on, and that's it. There are some that cross-dress a little bit while they identify as male, and then over time realize they are more comfortable that way, and then proceededly become less and less comfortable not doing so. And then, over time, they come to realize, oh, the reason I feel more comfortable dressing as a woman is because that's what I actually identify as. Like, it's a very, very common thing that happens where people who are allowed to express their gender identity learn more about themselves, and as they learn more about their own gender identity, they come to the conclusion themselves, oh, I'm different than what I thought, and that's okay. Now, I would like to note that in the post that Grums puts up, he tries to save his own ass by going, I don't believe gender will be as significant to the human race in the near future as we drive towards the singularity. Whatever the fuck that is. Whatever the singularity is, it means something different to every single person. Then he says, I think we should be what we want to be. For example, I always play as a female in MMOs in games that give me a choice. But the decision rests with the individual, once they are adults. Okay, so first of all, if a kid wants to play a female in an MMO, they're fucking allowed to play a female in an MMO. Who gives a shit? Singularity sounds like some Andrew Tate bullshit. It basically is. It basically is. But the other thing to note with that is what we have found is that kids who identify outside of what their gender was assigned, if we give them the time via things like puberty blockers and social therapy, if we give them the time to make that decision, sometimes they realize they are in fact trans, and then they come off the puberty blockers and go into HRT. Then we find some other scenarios where the kids realize maybe they're not trans, and they come out of the puberty blockers and everything's a-okay. So I think we mean the singularity where mankind can upload our minds to machines or the internet. Oh, yeah, no, that's not fucking happening. There's no such thing as brain uploading, because that's not how data works. You see, idiots like this don't, despite programming video games, don't seem to understand that the way data works is you never actually move data from one area to another, outside of when it's within a single physical disk. What is always happening is data is being deleted from part of a drive and then uploaded and copied onto another drive. The idea of uploading your brain into a computer would not actually be uploading your brain into a computer and then your consciousness goes there. You would effectively be committing suicide, and then a clone of yourself gets to live on after that fact. If you've ever seen Invincible, this is basically what happens to Robot during the course of that story, as he uploads himself into a new clone body based off of one of the other members of the team, and then comes out and realizes, oh, I'm not uploading myself over here. I've just made a clone with a copy of my brain. And then, of course, that copy has to die. It goes bye-bye. So, yep, same with a few other characters besides the Mauler twins. Yep, Mauler twins as well. You are always, and granted, that's in fiction, but at least it's fiction that understands what the brain upload thing is. In fiction and in reality, anytime you are moving data from one area to another, you are deleting it from one area and copying it to another area. You are not actually physically moving that data unless you are grabbing a drive and placing it into something else. So if we started taking parts of somebody's brain and uploading them into a drive, we would not be moving the cells and the consciousness to there. We would be creating a brand new one with all of the memories of the previous person. So the order of operations is copy, then delete for move. Yeah, that's details. Details. The point is, there's no such fucking thing as the singularity for the human race. And if that's going to be your argument for, like, gender abolitionists, then what the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing? But in regards to other people talking about this, we've got, she was trans in other countries that had the game. He was trans in a single translation. Every other one stuck with feminine boy or normal woman. Again, these are not translations. These are localizations, which is very, very different. A translation tries to keep as much of the original meaning of something as humanly possible. That's not what happened with Paper Mario and the Thousand-Year Door originally. It was localized. A localization, compared to a translation, doesn't try to bring as much direct meaning from the text over. It tries to create a new story that is as close to the original story as it can get, usually, while still keeping in mind a new audience, typically a Western audience. So the only thing that is a singularity of anti-trans brain rot. Yeah, and it's very, I will say, it's very strange to me how often anti-trans bigotry ends up being latched onto other kinds of bigotry and vice versa. There's a lot of bigotries that are just comorbid with one another. It's really weird. It's really, really strange. Like, I found it was a whole lot easier to be trans accepting once I wasn't Christian. You know, awkward. They're just a single point they keep focusing on despite everything else pointing to the contrary. Yep. What is this here? So it's surprised this guy is not trying to say he's undead or something along that line of bullshit. So he wouldn't do that because that would make him sound like a silly person. And you don't want to sound like a silly person when you're trying to convince people on the internet to pay you money so you can do a grifting job. Tales of Atonement, thank you for resubscribing as you give me internet money for my job. Thank you. I'm not saying I have experience with the dilemma of the grums. Oh, hello, Stitches. I don't want to deal with you. I'm just going to keep on walking. Red Joker, thank you for gifting a tier month sub. Oh, Jesus. He killed me in one shot. I'm glad I'm not playing hardcore WoW today. And apparently we started a hype train. Thank you, Sakura. Thank you, Sakura. There's also this part that I want to bring up as well from Madison here saying, I hate all these trigger tourists who just walk into games and hate them. Do you enjoy things? Vivian is currently a trans woman. You look at the context, and back when she was released, being trans wasn't bad. It was just abnormal. If anything, it's trad and base to them. So I actually agree 100% with this statement, because that's exactly what Grums is here. He is a triggered tourist. Somebody who obviously was not familiar enough with the material of Paper Mario up to this point, and yet now has to go on this particular grift. Though if he was familiar enough with Paper Mario up to this point, then it creates another problem, which is the grifting part of the problem. The admission that everything he is trying to do and sell is utter bullshit. Sylvie says, I don't think he cares about the lore. No, he doesn't. He cares about getting money. He cares about people paying him money so that he can talk about video games being too woke as if this is an actual problem in society. And meanwhile, by doing so, he is actively contributing to a problem in society. The rise of right-wing nut jobs, the rise of anti-trans activism, the rise of TERFs and shit like this. Like, he is actively propagating this by doing everything he can to suckle on the dead and just necrophaged teat of Gamergate. He is actively perpetuating the exact same bigotries that Gamergaters did everything in their power to pretend that they weren't propagating, but they were. There was never any part about Gamergate that was really about ethics in games journalism. It was literally from the get-go, how do we harass women we don't like? And it's been that from the beginning. And that's what Grums is. He caters to that audience. Now, has he specifically said to harass any specific women? That I don't know, unless any of you have examples of that. What he is, however, doing is fostering a fan base, insofar as you can call it that, of people who are willing to embrace their greater bigotry for as long as humanly possible through the lens of this is what makes me a true gamer or something TM. Whatever the fuck that means. Then you have people like this, who I would like Sawara to be evidence against, saying, stuff like this makes me glad I'm fluent in Japanese, means I don't really have to deal with the localization cringe all that much. Of course, I feel bad for all that have the luxury, who don't have the luxury of sinking in the time of becoming bilingual. That's kind of a big ask. So, this being done in... Remember I said, the Japanese script of the game is basically identical in this one regard. So, I've read it. You realize that ba-ba-ba-ba doesn't mean transgender, right? Well, again, Japan treats gendered language different than the United States does. Having a particular character associated with your character doesn't make them suddenly not trans. It can be as close to a cultural equivalent to transgender as possible. But there's plenty of people, especially in the VTuber sphere, who have a multicultural background who can tell you that they are from cultures that do not have words or ideas associated with transgender. But there are some cultures that do. And hell, in the United States, we didn't even have the word transgender to describe it until the last few decades. More insulting terms like transvestite and, well, I don't want to say the other ones, but there were more insulting terms that were used, generally speaking, that were considered the norm in English language. Whereas now, just, saying transgender makes perfect sense. Axolotl says the original had some borderline slurs, if I heard right, but it used negatively against her, not as a positive. Again, yeah, that was the idea of her sisters bullying her throughout that game. A lot of negative language being aimed at Vivian specifically, because that's what happens here. In the English version, for the longest time, we had it changed into just she was bullied. But why was she being bullied? That's where you figure out what the story is actually going for. Yeah, the evil characters used bad language while the good characters used more accepting language. Yeah, gee, imagine that. Also, as another example of this, if you wonder if it affects other languages, I regret to inform you that in this, it is the case. Left is the original PAL Spanish version, right is the remake. P.S. Remember, Nintendo has diversity, equity, and inclusion now. If you don't boycott this, they'll get away with it. They'll get away with what, Derek's? Diversity? Equity? Inclusion? Those are all positive words, you numb shit! Did your testicles get absorbed into your asshole today? Are you okay? Jesus Christ. So the transphobes unironically agreeing with Bedlam. Yeah, so when it comes to media like this is where we get to do the Homelander litmus test. What is the Homelander litmus test? Well, it's very, very simple. The Homelander litmus test works like this. You find a individual or a group of people that absolutely adore the show The Boys, and then you try to figure out what their favorite character is. If their favorite character is Homelander, run the fuck away. Run the absolute fuck away. Because if Homelander is your favorite character in a show like that, then I have to ask the question of why do you like the eugenics-loving fascist Superman ripoff versus the plethora of other characters in the show that are actually more likable? If you have a friend whose favorite character is Homelander, just ask them why and try to figure out what parts of the character they like the most. And if it sounds awkwardly like they're describing Donald Trump, then congratulations. You have used the Homelander litmus test effectively. You now have a liability on your hands. Tail says, that's not saying you can't like the villain. There is the villain we love to hate thing. Yeah, you're allowed to like Homelander, but if somebody adores Homelander and worships him as a character, this is what the litmus test is for. You figure out why they like them. Now, I love Homelander as a villain because he makes me uncomfortable. Every single time he is in a position of power, a positive position, anytime that he is on screen, you have no idea who is going to die next, who is going to survive him existing, because he's that much of an unhinged bigot. He's known for killing civilians. He's known for killing other heroes. He's known for causing already disabled heroes to lose even more of their functionality just to prove a point about how genetically superior he is compared to them. He is, in every way, shape, and form, a terrible, terrible person. And if those are the qualities that you like as positives for him, as opposed to negatives, that's the Homelander litmus test. If they see those things as negatives, then they're fine. If they see those things as positives, then we have something to worry about. Because what other characters in media or just in reality would this person make up garbage apologia for? K. Charles says, Homelander does this part of the story very well. That's part of being a piece of shit. Yep. Shadow Wolf says, I like Homelander for the same reasons I like Anakin. They're both accurate portrayals of fascism, one being an inaccurate portrayal of a leader of a fascist regime, and the other an accurate depiction of a victim of how fascism takes root in the mind. Yeah, they are both characters that were groomed into fascism. It's true. But that said, that's the entirety of the Paper Mario nonsense. Look forward to this discourse dying in 2 days. Because it always will. Because guess what? Grums stopped fucking bitching about the change that happened in Warhammer the minute that he had the ability to start bitching about Trench Crusade. And he stopped bitching about Trench Crusade the minute he had the ability to bitch about Paper Mario. And he'll stop bitching about Paper Mario the minute that there's something else for him to bitch about. Because that's what he does. He finds whatever thing gets snowflakey rhinoids angry and then talks about that exclusively for about a week, and about how it's the most important part in the culture war, and everybody needs to have their eyes on this, and then it pivots to another thing. And then everybody's got to have their eyes on that thing next. And then everybody has to have their eyes on the next thing next. And it is that over and over again in perpetuity. So the fuck happened with Trench Crusade? They had a Discord and they got rid of a whole bunch of bigots out of it. And that made Grums angry. Because apparently doing proper moderation on your Discord is a bad thing. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. And as always, everybody, don't be an idiot. Insert end video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Nixie-chan, the Oberon team, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.